City of 11. It is 11 o'clock right now.
Woohoo!
So I'm going to go ahead and start our introduction. Welcome to the Voice of San Francisco's Sunday Bunch space, despite the typo on the card. Um, I'm Mike Eggy, the editor in chief. Editorial director Susan Dyer Reynolds is here. Contributors Erica Sandberg and Liz Lay are here. And we are here to talk about some very extraordinary events that have been happening in San Francisco and in Washington over the last few weeks. Um, as everyone who's been watching the news knows, President Donald Trump has been wanting to send National Guard troops to various big cities. First to deal with immigration problems, then he started saying he was talking about crime problems. Not exactly a popular policy if you look at the polls. And I think maybe we've run into a situation where he started listening to public opinion, but we'll talk more about that later. But basically, I believe it was he first talked about it on Maria Bartiromo's program, saying that he was going to send troops to San Francisco, which of course got everybody at City Hall up in a real tizzy. And Mark Benioff from Salesforce chimed in and said, yeah, send them in. If they can be cops, that's great. That whether or not National Guard troops can be cops is another point we'll be discussing today. And you know, we started to have this sort of escalation where of anxiety about federal assets of one type or another coming into the city. And then we learned that about 100 federal agents, not soldiers, were assembling at the Coast Guard base in Alameda. And then by last Thursday, we had heard from some people heard from Scott Wiener earlier in that morning with a fairly inflammatory mailer, and then right afterwards at noon, um, Mayor Daniel Lurie had an announcement saying that he was going to discuss his talk with the president, and we all heard by noon that day that the president had decided to suspend his effort to send federal assets into San Francisco, at least for now. Um, Lurie's account of it was basically that he had sort of, reiterated what San Francisco was doing. Trump's account of it also talked about the fact that he had talked with Mark Benioff and talked with some other tech industry people in the city, and basically said that this was not, they sort of came to the judgment that maybe this was not the right time, though some type of federal intervention is apparently still being held over our heads. So I've got Erica here because apart from her regular charming presence, she was at that news conference that the mayor held, and she also interviewed Supervisor Matt Dorsey on the situation right afterwards. So she'll be talking about that. And then we have Liz Lay, who has been a really great contributor to us on data and other issues, and the courts and other issues. She has put together an article which we'll be publishing this coming week, probably Tuesday, on what the federal assets that can be sent to a city like San Francisco are and what they're actually able to do. And then Susan is going to start leading sort of the lead in with her opinion on the situation, and we'll sort of roundtable it. And hopefully, we'll also have time to have some listeners chime in as well towards the end. So, Erica, over to you. What happened at this press conference?
Yes, good morning, everybody. The press conference was packed, first of all. We had there were reporters and journalists from all over the country there waiting with bated breath. What are they going to say? And I thought Daniel Lurie's statements, and he was flanked by the DA, Brooke Jenkins, the interim chief, Paul Yep, various other people from city government. And I was trying to read between the lines because I found his announcement to be very tempered. It was interesting. It wasn't, listen, this is what happened. This is why the federal government, why Donald Trump backed off. They backed off for good. This is what's going to happen. It felt very trepidatious and odd to me. So, and I say that it's a little bit hard to put a finger on it, but I was just like, gosh, it feels like there's something that's not quite being said. And when you've been around politicians long enough, you start to have this sort of, this is odd. This is just strange. It just felt strange. Just not very clear. I did interview, and when I say, he said, we're making kind of interesting statements like, for now, we're prepared. I did talk with Donald Trump.
Well, he never says Donald Trump. He just says the President of the United States.
That's correct. That is correct. Yeah. And so I just, it's almost hard for me to explain, but I'm just going to have to say it was not a very firm, definitive presser. People looked uncomfortable. Even Brooke Jenkins looked uncomfortable. They all looked semi-uncomfortable. So, which I thought was really interesting. But it turns out, oh yes, and I did interview Matt Dorsey afterward, and I presented to him with the 6 to 6 problem. The 6 to 6 problem is from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The city goes into chaos mode. It is disgusting. Crime is in your face, thick of it. It is pure drug mayhem on the streets, on Market Street, Mission Street, in the Mission, South. It is extremely bad. If people have not seen the video that you can easily find on X with wonderful citizen journalists like J.J. Smith and Frisco Live 415 and various others, just go look. They're easy to find. And I asked Matt Dorsey, I said, well, what is going on with this? Why aren't you fixing this? You got a reprieve. Now what? What are you going to do? I said, why didn't you just accept the help? The help is there. Why not accept the manpower, the boots on the ground to help with this? And the answer that he gave is the answer that I find very frustrating, and I think a lot of people in the area also do find frustrating, which is it's a police matter. Okay, well, we're down between 500 and 600 cops, okay? What are we going to do now? Now what? So it's having to sit. How much longer are we going to have to wait before that gap between thickening out the ranks with enough officers and where we are today? It's nothing is happening. Change has not come to our city. So it was, and this is going to be my opinion here, a bit disgusting to actually say this is not important enough to accept assistance, whatever kind of assistance. And I also did talk with top brass earlier in the week about this situation. I said, what can the National Guard actually do? And he said, well, they can provide presence. They can provide backup. There are literally just more people, more eyes, and more ears in places that are so desperately need that. And so that's where I kind of came into the situation with. It was a little bit frustrating. I don't see any change on our streets right now whatsoever. So it was not a victory. It was a temporary reprieve. Donald Trump did say in his ending little what he said about the situation was stay tuned. So what does this mean? Stay tuned. Stay tuned is in you got the fix-it ticket, San Francisco. Either you're going to get a hold, you're going to take control, and the streets are going to be better, or get ready. Because then you're not going to be in control anymore. You lost your opportunity. So that's how I saw. That's what I felt. I thought people did walk away from the presser a little bit more confused than filled in. Questions?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I never felt, even before I saw what Donald Trump said, I never did feel that this was something that wasn't happening. I mean, clearly there are troops because there are protesters over in Alameda. And I believe also, Erica, you saw some federal cars, right, over there.
I did.
Right?
Yeah, Homeland Security Police. And they were in an area right literally after the press conference. I was walking home, walking straight through the Tenderloin, and for the very first time, I saw Homeland Security making drug busts. So it seemed to maybe have a flurry of attention, but let's face it, has anything changed? The answer is no. We got more video today that's clearly showing that the city has not taken control. They haven't. It is.
Okay, Erica, I don't want to interrupt you, but what I want to do is we're going to roundtable opinions later.
Okay.
And I want to give Liz a chance to
Liz,
to talk about her article and what she's found, and then we'll roundtable it and start talking about opinion. So, do you have any other concrete observations about the press conference?
Just that it was a temporary measure. Right now, we are in wait mode, I suppose. Not really much to say.
Okay, sounds good. Liz, why don't you go ahead and talk about what you found in terms of the various federal assets and what the differences are and what they can do, and whether or not local authorities can or cannot arrest or block what federal assets do.
Yeah, so let me just walk through the different federal organizations. We have, as you mentioned, the National Guard. There is the Department of Homeland Security, in which ICE is a smaller subunit of. There's also the DEA, which is a drug enforcement agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, which has a substantial narcotics division, and ATF, which is alcohol and tobacco and firearms. So in terms of training, the DEA and the FBI are probably the most narcotically specialized enforcement training. And of course, the Department of Homeland Security, because they also control all of our borders, right? All the drugs that come in and out through legal and illegal borders. The National Guard, not so much. They have partial or limited narcotics enforcement. Criminal investigations are also very limited. What's kind of unique about the DEA and the FBI and ATF and Department of Homeland Security is they're all not only, authorized to carry weapons in San Francisco, but they actually can make real arrests of fentanyl dealers. And when it comes to military might or actually dealing with firearms, think of, small cartel groups or drug groups that are, trying to protect their huge stash of drugs. I mean, I think it was Tom Wolfe that mentioned in 2023, SFPD had collected some 90 kilos of fentanyl, and that's enough to kill 45 million people, right? So they're going to be, heavily protecting their drugs with firearms. So firearms training and operations, definitely across the board, all of those federal agencies are prepared for that. What's different with the National Guard is they're more related to combat warfare. They're doing hostile terrain and invasions and how to survive. So it's a very different type of military training. Sometimes they provide what we call counter drug support, which is aerial support, or when they were brought in under Newsom, I think it was nearly 400 just a few years ago. They were more of a supportive. They didn't actually arrest people because they're not allowed unless they've been deputized. So that's kind of the interesting thing, is that they provide more of kind of as Erica mentioned, the kind of eyes and ears, and they can easily contact, Department of Homeland Security or any of the other federal agencies. With our SFPD, they cannot actually ask anybody what their immigration status is. So we've basically, because of sanctuary law, made it impossible for our, SFPD to even ask that question. So, that's kind of this, the complexity of it. And with the DEA and the FBI, they have a lot of different training in terms of how to not just detect, drugs and disrupt it, but evidence handling, which is very, very important in terms of prosecution. So when you sit in a San Francisco Superior Court, you'll see sort of, more junior level prosecutors, because Brooke Jenkins had to, pretty much restaff a large portion of her team after, recalled Boudin fired so many, seasoned prosecutors in his team, or a lot of them left, right? So you see the kind of sophistication that the DEA or FBI might have to really effectively prosecute in the federal courts, which is what we're leveraging with the federal fast track. That is allowing us to cooperate with federal agents like the DEA, FBI, ATF, in order to fast track fentanyl dealers through federal courts, through the Northern California jurisdiction. We have a court in San Francisco for that. And it is effective in terms of the fast track. And that was something that was started, with cooperation between like Nancy Pelosi and our DA Brooke Jenkins. And so that was how it got started. And that's been happening in San Francisco for quite some time. So if you talk to local law enforcement, since Boudin was ousted, we've been all the effective things that we've been doing with, as you may argue against, effective or not, but the amount of kilos of fentanyl that we're seizing is definitely something that we have been cooperating already with the DEA and FBI and ATF. And I believe Daniel Lurie knows this very well. That's why in his statement, he was very clear that he welcomes increased, support and amplification of these federal agents in San Francisco.
Liz, let me ask you about one thing again about the National Guard and their participation in DMAC, which is the current joint drug enforcement activity. Generally, my understanding is they provide some limited logistics and intelligence support. And intelligence support is basically they're taking in data from open sources, from arrests, from surveillance, and they're putting it into some type of data aggregator, which could be Palantir Gotham, or it could be GCCS or something on that order. And then they're providing that as network analysis to federal agents on the ground. Have you heard anything about how successful that is?
Well, I do know that through the federal fast track, we have been able to deport a lot more, and that has been effective. The only issue is that people are returning to San Francisco. So
Right.
The data is definitely helpful in terms of intelligence and trying to break up the cartels too, right? Because there is a huge problem with where the drugs come in. And so there's all these ports, legal ports where drugs come in. And I was talking to one of the police captains who said, even though most of our drugs are seized, in San Francisco, there's a large portion of drugs that come in from Oakland. And so, that 90 kilos that we're imagining in 2023, that's just a very small portion compared to all the other seizures outside of San Francisco and done, by federal agents in other areas, even before they reach urban centers like San Francisco. So, but I think the biggest issue comes in right now is with the disparity of the sentencing that happens in these federal fast track programs. And you're right, the National Guard serves as a huge support system in the intelligence. So, it's very important, but also the eyes and ears if they happen to be an actual presence in San Francisco.
Okay. So I think, so pretty much you've covered everything as far as the facts part, and we can move on to the roundtable then.
Yeah. I think actually I just wanted to ask one quick question for Liz is just definitively what let's just say tomorrow the National Guard shows up. What exactly are they able to? There's a lot of confusion. Even Brooke Jenkins, I believe, was at one point confused of the difference between ICE and and the National Guard in one of the Twitter posts she made, or X posts. Can you just definitively explain the difference between what the National Guard can and cannot do?
Yes, so the National Guard they don't have the authority to make any arrests in San Francisco, in contrast to the other 4 federal agencies. You know, the ATF, the FBI, the DEA, and Department of Homeland Security have authority to carry weapons and make arrests in San Francisco. So even if the National Guard were here, they would not be able to do that unless they were deputized. And these would be federalized National Guards. The other thing that I forgot to mention was, you know, there was a lot of political partisan, debate on X, and it happened that maybe, I think it was, whether it was Nancy Pelosi or Brooke Jenkins was mentioning some sort of intervention if these guards came in and, they would make arrests. And then the U.S., I believe, Attorney General Todd Blanche said, well, you need to stand down because that goes against the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution, which is Article 6, Clause 2. And it basically says when there are conflicting statutes, the federal government has supremacy, and they cannot be, prosecuted or arrested for doing their jobs, basically, under the law.
Exactly. That's I think one of the major points of confusion here, and I think we'll probably go over more of that in the roundtable about the confusion and why that confusion exists.
Yeah.
So, Susan, what do you think of all this?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, Daniel Lurie is getting way too much credit, because I know from little birdies that the calls came from Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA. He did recently buy a $40 million mansion close by Daniel Lurie's mansion in Billionaire Row in Pacific Heights. That's also where Mark Benioff has a mansion, though he does spend most of his time now at his home in Hawaii. He does come for Dreamforce in his private jet, but doesn't spend, although he's born and raised San Franciscan, he doesn't spend that much time here because he has a co-CEO at Salesforce. I do know they both made calls to Trump prior, I believe, to that call with Lurie. I hypothesize that the president probably didn't even really know, but, I just don't see him being, let's just say he's not so drilled down on things that he probably, I don't even think he knows. I don't think he would even know who Lurie was, to be honest with you, until this conversation. I mean, probably somebody had to tell him. I just don't see him being that drilled down on local mayors, to be honest. I doubt he even knew who London Breed was. So what is important to Trump is money. And Jensen Huang, Mark Benioff, these high-powered tech CEOs have, supported him, made promises of investments in the, United States, made, promises of investments to him and his pet projects. I don't know exactly whether Huang and Benioff were involved in giving him money for his inauguration, but certainly others were, like Sam Altman, and many of the people who gave money to him for that and for other pet projects are, have businesses or reside in San Francisco or in, Silicon Valley. I mean, ironically, NVIDIA is located in Santa Clara in the Silicon Valley, so the workers don't have to come to San Francisco. But Huang sold his mansion in, I believe, Hillsborough and moved to San Francisco. And Mark still does own his home on Billionaire Row. So they do have clearly invested reasons just to be invested in San Francisco. We all know that Mark Benioff, just before Dreamforce, made the comment to the New York Times that he welcomed the National Guard. Again, I think a misunderstanding of exactly what the National Guard is or could do, which caused a huge flurry of, San Francisco officials like Brooke Jenkins and Scott Wiener and Nancy Pelosi, saying they won't allow it, even though they really didn't seem to understand. Any of them, even the New York Times, didn't seem to understand that National Guard really couldn't do doo-doo, except to stand in front of the Nancy Pelosi building and guard it if there was a riot or something. So I think, where I'm at is that this is a temporary thing. And I think that, I think Trump still has it out for say. I don't think it would be a shock to anyone to know that he still has it out for San Francisco and doesn't care much for Gavin Newsom at all. And so, yeah, I don't think anybody should rest on their laurels, put it that way, or their Laurel Heights.
Cool. Liz, what do you think insight-wise about all of this?
Well, I think the fact that we have been using these other agencies like the DEA and FBI, and, my understanding talking to our SFPD is that it's been very effective. So we probably kind of want to put the partisan politics and grandstanding aside and not alienate, the actual forces that we would need to really make a huge impact on the fentanyl crisis. We think about all these major ports that these guys help with, these men and women, and that's why they came in through the Coast Guard Island. That's a huge, entryway next to the Port of Oakland. We have SFO drugs come in through the bridges. There's all these fentanyl coming through the U.S. mail. And so we have to really disrupt the cartel networks too. And these are very sophisticated elements that, I think the federal agents who are specifically trained in that area, those are not the people that we want to alienate. So I thought Lurie did a good job of actually saying, we welcome them and we would, welcome more amplified resources. And when I was downtown on Friday, I did notice a lot more, dozen more, unmarked vehicles and all sorts of activity, but I don't know what agency they were related with. But there has been some of the political rhetoric that was coming out, like with the Wiener's email, I think that kind of put in, and even with Maria Sue, she was sending out stuff to San Francisco Unified School District. She's the superintendent. It was kind of instilling and stirring a lot of fear, I think, in the immigrant community. And that kind of generates like a lot of protests, but also a lot of paid protesters that come from outside of the city, which showed up on the Coast Guard Island in Alameda.
Yep. So, and actually, if I can go to Erica for a second, because you had talked about unmarked vehicles. Mm-hmm. While you were talking, I was cut off for a bit and had to log back on. Did you mention that after you got out of City Hall, you saw a larger number of Federal Protective Service vehicles in and around the Civic Center area?
Yes, I did.
That you did not notice before?
Right. So I was on Polk Street, actually, Lower Polk. And the next thing I know, I see a DHS police vehicle. Then I saw several white van type vehicles and SFPD squad cars. And they had sort of swarmed onto, I believe it was Polk and Ellis. And I had never seen that before. And I did see it. And that was right across, actually right at the street where the community health center is. They give out free meals and work with homeless population. And people were running outside and kind of in a flurry saying, what's going on? What's going on? So it wasn't just me who was looking at that going, well, this is unusual. It was the people who were working there as well, taking photos, taking videos, yelling at the people who were getting out of those vehicles. So it was very unusual. And I don't know how long it lasted, but I did reach out to one of the citizen journalists who takes a lot of video, Frisco Live 415, and I said, listen, I've got to go. I have to go type up this story. Can you take it from here? And he was on it, and he took a lot of footage. So, yeah, certainly it something is happening when it comes to these both unmarked vehicles, but also other agencies that are stepping in.
I guess that the first reaction that I have to this, I'm probably the furthest left opinion-wise of anybody in this group, and I look at I try to look at this from a historical, political perspective, and I think the problem that we've had is that first off, the far left, to an extent, has captured urban policy at the activist level, and then at the government level in our cities, we generally have center-left people who are definitely afraid of going after the abuses of the far left because they want to be able to get reelected, because the people who control the precinct captains and who are able to get, who are the people who get out the vote every election day, are often the activist left. I mean, that, you know, it's the vanguards are always the most active in any political party, regardless of political direction. And so you've got this situation where urban policy has become incredibly deranged, where it's okay to do drugs outside, it's okay to overdose because you have bodily autonomy, it's okay to block traffic without a permit and damage property during political demonstrations, because it's, you know, that's not a riot. 20 years ago, we would have considered that to be a riot, but it's not a riot anymore. And it you know, that's not what most people around the country, or even those who live in cities, agree with. They wonder what the hell is going on. The Trump movement seized on that for any number of reasons, and you know, and this is why we've seen this sort of end justify the means move in the Trump policy to, the first thing out of their mouths was troops, which in retrospect isn't great politically, because now Trump is underwater in the polls, and you know, the focus on troops is one of those reasons. And also the troops can only, you know, they can the National Guard troops are trained to take and hold territory and then shoot back at anybody that they think is shooting at them. So
Correct,
they cannot enforce the law. And they're also in a situation where when they're put in a civil disorder situation, they are often put in a situation where Erica, I think we had talked last week, and you said that you had just started watching the HBO miniseries John Adams.
Yeah, wonderful.
And if I remember correctly, one of the first episodes of John Adams, they reenact, or they depict the Boston, what came to be known in history as the Boston Massacre, which is not really a massacre. Only a handful of people got killed, but it was this incident where people were throwing snowballs at colonial troops, British colonial troops, and knocking their hats off. And then somebody heard a crack, or something broke, and so the British started shooting people, and a couple of people died. And I'm sure, you know, everyone's probably heard about the Boston Massacre in their high school civics classes or history classes. And then, you know, fast forward to the Vietnam era, we've heard about Kent State, where National Guardsmen were put in a situation where they heard the wrong thing and started shooting, and people died. And this is the kind of thing that I think the general public thinks about when people start talking about troops. Now, Trump's own base, I think, when they hear about troops, they think about the same things that Trump thinks about, which is, I'm pressuring my enemies and we're going to vanquish them, and this is an ideological war, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, if he had started with a surge of civilian law enforcement federal assets for the right reasons, nobody would be in the situation that we're in right now.
Right.
And, you know, personally, you know, because I don't like Donald Trump, I just assign that to Trump and his character and his and frankly his what I find very, very strange is that there's this thing called federalism. Federalism is a big building block of American government, and that has to do with things like there is the supremacy clause, but there's also local control and the police powers. And customarily, police power, unless there's something really wrong, the police powers are left to the states. And up until recent years, it's always been political conservatives who have been really staunch defenders of federalism. There's the Federalist Society is a major right-wing think tank. And now that doesn't seem to be the case anymore because Trump has said end justifies the means. And of course, that a lot of people argue that, Democrats are now saying end justifies the means with Prop 50 and what's going to happen in Virginia and why hopefully Democrats will take back Congress next year. This is the so much of this is being handled as a sort of passion play or fantasy, and there really isn't that much concentration on what's really happening on the ground. Like, for instance, with the Trump administration, so much of this was in the beginning about immigration. And now finally it's about drugs because people in San Francisco are saying, this is about drugs. This is the biggest problem that we have.
If I could jump in, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. None of this would be, this would be an absolute non-issue if our communities were clean, safe, and protected. So, I think that's the sort of focus that we all need to be having here is, well, why did this even come up as a potential thing that would be happening on our streets? And it's because we have a very real problem. Because we have not just a real problem, but a growing problem. It is a farce to say that crime is down, and I know Susan can talk at length about this. It is not down. It is what you call a crime, or how you categorize it. The crime is actually very well entrenched, and our administration is choosing not to focus on it. It is a tumor that is growing, and Trump never would have said a damn thing. None of this would be an issue if we didn't have that, or even if we were making inroads. If there was proof that Lurie and the rest of the administration was actually making a difference, if we could even see it with our own eyes. So, I think it's so frustrating to me, and I think to citizens of San Francisco, to all of us, to say, well, what is crime? Why is it not being categorized as crime?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and it brings me back to some months ago. It may have even been last year, but some months ago, Ezra Klein sort of dedicated one of his columns to, one of the reasons that Democrats are seen as feckless on these issues is, and even in the public perception that crime rates are going down, is that what he calls the urban disorder is still there, and I think people are still trying to bifurcate things like somebody breaking into your garage or car versus the kind of petty crimes that there's basically, and I use this phrase over and over again whenever I write about it at The Voice, and for that matter in other publications, the nexus of homelessness, public drug use, and petty crime, that things swirl out from there. And I think one of the major problems we've had, especially in San Francisco, and I think this even plays into the reason that we don't have a surge going on in the city right now, is that up until COVID, most of us just didn't see this. I mean, you live in Nob Hill, so I don't know where you live, whether you live in High Nob Hill or Lower Nob Hill, but you walk down a couple of blocks in Nob Hill, you're going to see it. But people who live on the West Side, they before COVID, they didn't see it. People who live where I live in North Beach didn't see it. People who live out in the avenues in this, in the South, etc., didn't see it. But then COVID happened, and the little blots of disorder in the Tenderloin and 6th Street grew. And now, whenever you drive down Market Street, it looks like a George Romero film. And so everyone is now concerned about it. I think that's one of the major issues. And the people who are in that category include the many, it's important to remember that both Benioff and Lurie are part of the socialite class in the city. And they're, ordinarily they're kind of most of their peers are isolated from the issue. And they don't necessarily want to see more hassles, even if there's a problem that has to be done, because they still see themselves as isolated from the issue. So I think that's
yeah. Let's not forget that Benioff jets in and wants everything perfect so that he doesn't get so that his Dreamforce doesn't get a bad rap and get like Imagine, for example,
right.
If someone attending Dreamforce went down to the Tenderloin or walked out of the event and got caught in the crossfire of a drug shooting or something, that's his greatest nightmare. Once that Dreamforce is over, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but last year he started making the same noise, saying, I'm telling London Breed, I'm moving to Las Vegas if you don't clean this up before Dreamforce. He always gets his way, and and I know Mark, and I like Mark. I mean, I know him, I like him, and I do believe that he is a native son who greatly cares about the city. But at the other point, he also does care very much about the bottom line of Dreamforce and the national opinion of Salesforce. And that's a big, every year, because otherwise you're not going to, I pretty much think you won't hear much from him other than that. Because he goes back to Hawaii and, he's certainly on the news all the time and on the financial news, and he's busy running Salesforce, but he's not walking around the Tenderloin ever. Maybe when he is in town. And all of these guys, Lurie included, travel with a huge security force. They have big unmarked SUVs they have drivers who are also security guards. So even if they were to whiz through the Tenderloin, it's not the same as the families that I saw when I walked the Tenderloin for an hour at night with a city official a couple of weeks ago, and we watched people not just doing drugs but dealing drugs, and a mother with 2 children had to walk through it. And it was, that's the stuff that they and their children are completely immune to, because their children are never going to be in that situation. Let's just be honest. Lurie's included.
Yeah, exactly.
I was almost late to the press conference because as I was going down the street, there was a man who said that he was a building manager, and he was begging people. And this is on Hyde, so it was Hyde and Hyde and Golden Gate or so, and he was begging people, please stop smoking fentanyl right here. And they were completely ignoring him. And I stopped and I talked to him and I said, what's going on? And he looked over and he goes, what's going on? I'm the building manager. He pointed over to a window, the street level, and he said, I've got a cancer patient who lives right here. She can't open her window to get fresh air. I've got families that live up here. I've got families. I've got, and he's pointing out, and his frustration was just off the charts. And I totally understood. And then a woman walked by, African-American woman, she's holding a dog, and then she joined in on the conversation, and she's like, yeah, it's terrible. So these are real people who live right there, and they are the ones who are being completely ignored and neglected. So I think that is where the disconnect is that you have the city officials who say are reticent to accept any kind of help, and now they are accepting a bit more. But you've got the Jackie Fielders and the Shaman Waltons and whatnot who are really trying to keep it pushing out. But there seems to
Jackie
be very
Fielder, the
little.
angel of death.
Yeah, there seems to be very little regard for actual people who live in these communities and suffer very badly. Um, and because that's what I keep hearing is that we don't want it. We don't want it. We can handle it. You're stepping on our toes. And I'm like, where's the focus here? The focus is not on the community. It's on their jobs, their egos. That's my interpretation of it. You could take it as you want.
Well, Jackie Fielder hasn't made an appearance in the mission since her, photo ops in January, and when Mayor Lurie first took office, and they did some photo ops in the mission with some business owners. No one sees her there. Ask anybody. I mean, it's anyone who lives at Julian Street, which Erica, JJ, and I have covered a lot, the Gubbio project and what goes on there. Erica, JJ, and I walked that street at night, and there were encampments all over the sidewalk. We've been there during the day. There are, junkies out front smoking fentanyl, that the smoke goes right up into the open windows where children live. Jackie has never once met with the neighbors on that street.
It does not appear to be important to her.
She doesn't, Jackie needs to remember who she represents, but she clearly doesn't, because the people who elected her, once again, don't deal with this on a daily. She's, endorsed by the, frankly, far left white liberals that live in Bernal Heights, like our buddy Hillary Ronan, who's off traipsing through Spain with her family right now.
Right.
So, it's just very unrealistic. Her view of the world.
It's also disingenuous, because
it's completely disingenuous.
you have a message put out by the city of San Francisco. You have a message from supervisors Shaman Walton, Cheyenne Chen, Jackie Fielder, Bilal Mahmoud, and Connie Chan, who all said, we stand with our immigrant community. You need help, report ICE activity. I am with you, Mike. I totally am with you. There are people here who are only here and are illegal. They entered illegally, but they're working hard. Leave them alone. Help them. This is not the focus, but they're standing with the immigrant community. You're looking at the Mission District, Tenderloin, south of Market, which is a very heavily immigrant community, and they're being hurt by these problems, by the drug activity, by the crime, by the shootings, by the stabbings.
Yeah.
Right, because they're trying to raise kids too. So essentially, they want us to crack down on fentanyl, and I think this really goes to the demand side that's not being addressed in the fentanyl crisis. I mean, essentially, we have legalized all of the open air drug use. You're not counting the crime of 8,000 plus homeless addicts. A lot of them come here as drug tourists. And we have sanctuary laws that are actually helping the fentanyl dealers. So real, immigrant families are actually being very hurt by this. And I think that the issue I have is conflating real hardworking immigrants with the other issue of the fentanyl crisis and illegal drug dealing and the Prop C that which Benioff, highly supported and advocated for. He's never really come out and said, hey, that UCSF Benioff study on harm reduction and housing first is illegitimate. And he's never come out and said, yeah, that's just wrong. That's not what our streets show. And I think that's what
he paid $38 million for it.
Exactly. So I'm a little frustrated by. Yes, I think he's a great guy and he's done a lot of great things for San Francisco. But I think we do need his leadership voice to kind of condemn a study that's basically fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to, because he paid for it and he put Margot Kushel in the driver's seat. And, as Erica can tell you all, originally we were, hoping to get the raw data from that study for The Voice early on, something Mark supported, by the way. But it was Margot Kushel, the doctor who heads up the Benioff Homeless and Housing study, who put her foot down and refused to let us have the raw data. And then, after a little investigating, I believe, Liz, it was you that told me, well, they're not peer reviewed. So that was kind of shocking, right? I mean,
Yep.
Right.
$38 million for studies that aren't peer reviewed. And then the doctor who says 99% of the people on the streets came from San Francisco. We all remember, the article from Pirate Wires, that, with Sanjaya Friedman, who, broke that study down. And it turns out that they were mostly people who had literally just gotten out of prison and been released in San Francisco. So when asked by the few people that she sent out on the streets, the small control group that they utilized said, yeah, I'm from San Francisco, because they were just dropped off on, from a bus from San Quentin.
Yeah, has anybody ever taken the Greyhound from Sacramento to San Francisco?
I have.
Yeah, it's an experience, because the majority of people on those buses are parolees.
Yep.
On many days, on many trips.
Same with if you go from San Francisco to LA and back, it's a pretty crazy trip as well.
And they're there with $200 or however much stuff how much goodbye money they're given, and they check into a residential hotel, and they go back into the same patterns of life that got them in trouble. They're still revolving around the same patterns of life that got them into trouble in the first place.
I took the Greyhound from San Diego to Philadelphia.
Oh.
Long time ago.
Oh, dear.
It was an experience I will never forget. It was kind of fabulous. You go through areas that most people will never ever see or probably can't imagine. So yeah, it's definitely America.
Yeah.
But to say that they're from San Francisco is a huge stretch, right? And so now it all makes sense why, despite Benioff wanting us to have the raw data, the doctor who did the study did not.
Yeah, I mean, the problem that we have, the fact that we've sort of created this open air drug market in San Francisco that is, first off, it's a trap for people who become homeless for economic reasons. Secondly, it is an attractant for people who are sort of doing the circuit. Back when I was running The Wall, which is this bulletin board for San Francisco politics that we ran all through the 90s with David Latterman, one of the regular contributors was a guy named Arthur Evans. He's a gay guy. He was a contemporary of Harvey Milk. He sort of grew up politically in that period. I knew a lot of San Francisco insiders because those are the people he hung out with. But he found himself slowly alienated from those people because, he looked at what was happening to the Haight in the late 70s and what's been happening with the Civic Center and Tenderloin in recent years, and he was just sort of speaking out against it, saying you can't do this. And he would call these people who do the drug circuit narco nomads. And so you have this issue. So you have multiple issues coming in here, and it's really horrible that it catches people into a cycle of, either homelessness or extended homelessness, and then overdoses and death. And our answer to it policy-wise has been, because the policy structures are captured by the activist class, is these people have bodily autonomy. I actually got, I posted about one of our articles on Blue Sky, and it was forwarded, it was reposted, and there was a commentary by a certain NPR reporter that said, "Oh, this perspective is interesting because most people believe that relapse is a normal part of addiction." Yeah, it's like, overdoses are normal. You shouldn't be stopping them. People get thoughts like that. Where do people get thoughts like that?
It's really horrible.
I also wanted to acknowledge that Gina from Mothers Against Drug Overdoses and Deaths is out there in our audience, and so if she wants to chime in anytime, just let me know. And also congratulations on that award you got from the San Francisco Democratic Party this week, which leads me to another point is that people understand what the problem is. It's the question of being able to create the political will to act on the problem. And that seems to be the difficulty. And I don't understand it. Voters don't understand it, which is why so many people see Democrats as ineffectual.
Yeah, I mean, every time, and I have, pointed out many times that, while Matt Dorsey and Mandelman were the only ones who were for removing fentanyl dealers from the list of people that could be protected by the sanctuary city, which just seems like a no-brainer because they're definitely not protected in the Silicon Valley or Marin or Mendocino, where we just returned from, which is, they have their fair share of issues with the cartels, mostly from Russia there for the illegal pot trade, which, by the way, legalizing drugs did not, legalizing pot. We talked to a lot of people up there while we were there. That used to be in the business, that are the legal business, who have had to. One guy had to go back to being a landscaper like John, where he's trimming lavender instead of pot bushes. So it's not it didn't work at all. So the whole legalized drugs thing is just a bunch of bull. But they're still I didn't see. You don't see any of that in when you travel to other parts of California. And there's a reason for that, and that's because it's allowed in San Francisco. And when I interviewed Matt Mahan in San Jose about why I don't see it around when I was at the interim housing site, by the way, he calls them interim, not permanent supportive. He said because, he expects enforcement. He won't tolerate it, and the chief is aware of that. He's quietly strong. He doesn't talk as much as Daniel Lurie. He just does things, which I wish Daniel Lurie would do more of. People think I can't stand Daniel Lurie. I think he's a really nice guy. I've met with him. I've sat with him, had coffee for over an hour. He's a genuinely, easy to talk to person, but now he's a politician, and that changes things because now he's under the hammer to get things done. And so when he does things like blames JJ's videos for making San Francisco look bad, that makes him look bad, in my opinion. Why isn't there a video like that from someone like JJ in San Jose? Because there is no open air drug market in San Jose. There is none. He put stay away orders in St. James Park. And then he goes and very loudly says, when he needs to, that why are the judges releasing these guys when they arrest them with the stay away orders? He puts pressure on the courts, can't control the courts, but can certainly call them out. I remember when Daniel Lurie was running, he said, and this is in writing, I believe in the Standard, he said, I'm going to tell judges to keep the dealers in jail until their trials. Okay, well, you don't have that power,
right?
But you certainly could be more adamant about wanting dealers. And what I'm really not hearing from Daniel Lurie is, hey, look, I separate dealers from Honduras from hardworking, people who arrive here from dangerous situations and are, frankly, working at jobs that are, spoiled drug tourists would never take. I can't tell you how many times I pointed at signs where they're standing right in front of a McDonald's, and I tell them, they pay $24 an hour. No, I can't. My shoulder. And I said, well, your shoulder, you're holding up a sign. You've been standing here for 4 hours holding up a sign. How bad can your shoulder be? Right. They don't want those jobs. And so, people that I have a friend who's a chef. His name is Ryan Scott, and he grew up in the Central Valley and was getting in trouble in high school. And one year his dad, who had a restaurant, took him to a friend who ran a strawberry farm and told him, this is where you're going to work and live this summer. And he did. And guess what? He learned how hard that is and has a huge respect as a chef for the people that grow, that pick the vegetables and the fruits. Because, again, our spoiled drug tourists, I've written an article about it, put them in the avocado farms. They need people to work those. An experienced avocado picker makes $500 a day. So where are the white people that want to do this? I'm just saying, those are not the people that ICE needs to be going after. And I think Daniel Lurie's more than aware of that. But what he isn't saying is, but we do need to go after the ones who are peddling poison, and they are not welcome here. And it's time to start arresting them. And that's what Matt Mahan says. And that's what Daniel Lurie needs to say if he wants to be taken seriously.
I'm going to go ahead and read out a comment we have from Robert O'Reilly. Hypothetical, if the Board of Supervisors had passed Matt Dorsey's legislation to carve out fentanyl dealers from the sanctuary ordinance, would we have avoided this whole episode of National Guard and extra ICE intervention? Because San Francisco could have deported the dealers on its own, or which is to say they could have referred them for deportation on their own. This would save some jail space, reduce court caseloads, obviate PD permit delays, and reduce mental health diversion recommendations. Pretty damn good point.
Yeah, I think the sanctuary laws make it very difficult for our law enforcement to be as effective as they can. And if you look at the federal fast track, the biggest issue right now, even though we are convicting and prosecuting, if we deport without any incarceration, what's happening is the Honduran drug dealers are coming back into San Francisco for the second and third time, which caused one of the federal judges to pretty much say, this is ridiculous. This sentencing is too lenient. And even compared to federal courts in other states across the U.S., we're asking for 8 years, and it should be 20 years if your drugs kill somebody.
Right. That was Judge Alsop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, on one level, it seems counterintuitive to imprison someone and then deport them, but the reality is, there needs to be some type of deterrent.
Yeah.
And I'm not. Well, there's this temptation on my part is that whenever I walk down that area and I see the person who is obviously slinging, with it looks like they do it with absolute impunity.
Yep.
I want to see as strong a deterrent as possible. Let's just put it that way.
Well, let's remind everyone, though, that San Jose is also a sanctuary city, but they do make the distinction between who they give, who they're willing to protect. And they're not willing to protect fentanyl dealers. And that is just the bottom line. Until San Francisco, would it have made a difference? I don't think so, because San Francisco's entire hierarchy is caught up in this, right? So I don't see any politician in San Francisco that has the power to make those decisions making those decisions, because you've got a public defender that actively works, for goodness sake, Michael Moritz, who funds the San Francisco Standard, he gave $3.5 million to Daniel Lurie specifically for the public defender, so the public defender could defend illegal immigrants, including fentanyl dealers. And meanwhile, they're complaining that they don't have enough money to defend other defendants. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard of.
And it begs the question as to why is our public defender even an elected position? If you look at all the other counties across the Bay Area, they don't have an elected public defender. It is appointed like, the police chief.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
What I would love to do one of these days is either interview or bring here Jeff Brown. Jeff Brown is Jerry Brown's cousin, and he was also the longtime San Francisco public defender before Jeff Adachi.
Wow.
And he's always been incredibly good for insights as to what the real purpose of a public defender's office is. You have to, what you are essentially doing is protecting, or what you're supposed to be doing is protecting the due process and ensuring that, your defendant gets due process, but you're also but you also have obligations to the community, because you're going to ultimately, with some of the more difficult defendants, if you feel they're really worth defending, you're going to need the community's help. And that's sort of gone out the window in the furthering of shall we say, in quotes, professionalism of the legal profession of the criminal court system as an adversarial system. And that started under Jeff Adachi, because, in addition to being a deputy public defender, he was also a law school teacher, and very much believed in the professionalism aspect of it and the oppositional adversarial system part of it. And so he was doing everything he could to train his public defenders to be, real courtroom warriors in ways that, that in previous generations judges just would not tolerate. He would take, he would have his attorneys being trained in seminars that are run by attorneys like Maureen Callens, who was eventually disbarred for her conduct as a defense attorney. And I think Liz had mentioned somewhere a statistic that after it didn't necessarily start the actual statistical outcomes didn't start happening under Adachi, but after he died in office and Manu Raju took over, essentially, you started to see this really, really chilling statistic about the nature of criminal trials, which I don't remember Liz, do you remember that?
Yes. So basically, we are supposed to show our criminal court, clearance rate and how many cases get resolved and in what way. And San Francisco Superior Court has basically defied state law and refused to submit those numbers to the California Judicial Council. Of all the counties, there's only like 2 or 3 counties that are refusing that, including LA and San Francisco. And it begs the question as to, is it deliberate? Because we're not actually having the number of trials, even though we have plenty of judges and per capita, even more so than all these other Bay Area counties. So it says that there's a transparency issue, and we do have roughly 1/3 of our judges now come from a public defender's background, and the sort of the delay, diversions, probations in these trials are definitely something we can't scrutinize if we aren't allowed to see those numbers. And public defender Raju is saying that he doesn't have enough resources, but that's actually not true at all. And he's actually filed less cases, criminal cases overall, than Adachi by a huge amount.
Adachi, actually, I knew him and met with him on a fairly frequent basis. He actually helped me with my story about Greg Sir when I said it was time for him to step down because of the young men of color being shot in the back on a alarming rate. I actually went to Jeff Adachi to get information and details on it, and he had moments of brilliance. He did his job, and certainly not always on the, up and up as far as I've written before about how he had, no problem using witnesses' immigration status against them if it would get his client off. So, for example, there was a case of a woman who was being, abused domestically, and in order to get his client off, he tried to scare her by the fact that she was also here illegally. So let's not pretend these guys are saints, because they're not. They're very, decide who, they pick and choose who they're going to go after their, immigration status wise. But at least Adachi was a true litigator, more than he was a politician. And I feel Manu Raju is just an activist, and he really needs to go. I mean, my opinion is that he needs to go. I think he's probably the worst public defender San Francisco's ever had.
Exactly. I mean, we went from an 83% criminal court clearance rate under Adachi to something now in the California Judicial Council report like 32%, because it's incomplete. He's refusing to give these numbers. And also after Raju joined, we had felony filings plunged 25%. That means it doesn't mean that crime went down 25%. In felonies, they just refuse to file those. So there are huge issues in which he claims that he has more work, but that's not the case at all. He has less work and more money, 30% more budget. But they're not going to trial for exactly the reasons, because they're being delayed and diverted, and motions to detain are not being granted by these judges. So it makes it very difficult for the DA to prosecute these fentanyl dealers. Hence, we had to use the federal fast track to begin with.
And let's also not forget when we talk about, the other thing that is driving me crazy lately is, Lori with the, let's go San Francisco, crime is down 30%. You've also got to look at the fact that San Francisco does not have at all, as other cities do, a transparent dashboard that pulls together all of the departments and adds in all of the statistics. So, for example, as Liz will be writing in an upcoming column that she's been investigating for quite some time, and it's her work is, by the way, Liz, just incredibly impressive work that you do on the crime and justice beat. But the fact is we're not including juvenile crime, and juvenile crime is up. There's no doubt about it. It's not being included. If you were to include that, Daniel Lurie's numbers would go plummet. I mean, the crime is definitely up in the juvenile category. The other thing is that we don't consider urinating in public, defecating in public, going crazy, being naked, having sex in public. We don't consider doing drugs, selling drugs, any of that as crimes. So whereas if someone ran naked down the street of San Jose, or was out in the street doing drugs, they'd be arrested, and that would count as an arrest and as a crime. In San Francisco, that does not ever get recorded. So the other issue too is, talking about homicides being down. Most homicides, as most people know, are committed by someone that the person knows. About 90, I believe it's 95 or 96%. But also between 1965 and 2020, according to the FBI, America's homicide clearance rates have plummeted, just gone down so low. San Jose is one of the few cities that has cleared all of its homicides. And so to say homicides are down, well, they're also not clearing them. They have America in general has a problem with America, with a declining homicide clearance rates. Mm-hmm. So it's all the numbers and stats. Remember when Boudin was in office, the Chronicle was constantly doing stories about data that they could bend and twist to make him look better. And all I would simply do is say, great, well, let's look at how many cases he's tried. That's the kind of information that will tell you things, right? So when I did that, it turned out he had only tried about 12 cases, and not one of them was a felony. So those are the kind of things to me that are more important. It's also important to dig into individual cases. For example, the Hanako Abe, Elizabeth Platt, Troy McAllister case. You have to dig into these cases and see where they went wrong. Statistics only get you so far. So to say crime is down and, the very next morning you wake up to 5 people stabbed in the Richmond district makes people feel like they're being gaslit. And I believe that's why his, commentary on X, the comments have gone from, yay, Daniel Lurie, to, oh, shut up. Because they definitely have. I mean, if you look at them, they've gone from about, I'd say 80% positive to about 95% negative.
Yeah.
And we're solving less crime because when we passed Prop 57 and we made it illegal to collect DNA for misdemeanors, those actually helped to solve historically 60% of the felony crimes of like murders and rapes and things like that. So
wow.
That's what is very interesting. And, I think that we need to talk a little bit more about how those laws that we've passed, including Prop 47, which, once fentanyl is, put on there, what if they come up with a more addictive precursor, which is what the cartels are working on right now in Mexico with, bribes to chemistry students because they want to be able to make it, create the precursors or come out with something, even more addictive. So we have all these issues related to state propositions that we've passed that impact us on the city level.
And is that something that will be in an upcoming article? Because that's fascinating.
Yes.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Excellent.
Fascinating. I mean, I had never even thought about that. But you're right, because there have been cases I have followed where the person was caught because they were caught for a very minor crime. I mean, anybody that watches Dateline, which covers national cases, will see, cases of people that, they grabbed their DNA from a cup and it turns out, yes, they were the murderer, But if you're not getting that DNA from somebody who's arrested for drunk driving or, misdemeanor, then of course you're not going to find out if he's also that guy that raped the child,
Exactly. And that's also goes to the argument of sort of fares on public transportation, right? Do you enforce fare evasion? And you know, if you talk to the police, they're going to tell you every single time there's a felony on public transportation, that person is probably also a fare evader, all these other misdemeanors. So you're actually preventing further, you know, more scary crimes on public transportation by making sure that fare evaders don't use public transportation.
Exactly, and this is something that's not often discussed because, you know, it's, you know, the mainstream, you know, opinion is that fare evasion is essentially hassling, especially in California where fares don't actually, they only contribute part of the actual funding for transit. But the reality is that when you pay for something, you tend to respect it more. So there's a sociological dimension to this as well, that, you know, that not only are you keeping offender, you know, certain types of offenders out, you're also essentially, you know, reinforcing the fact that, you know, think twice before you pull out that magic marker and put something on the seats, you know, because you're paying for something that you could get thrown off the vehicle for. And
then there's also the lack of follow-up, right? I mean,
yeah.
Liz, you have a story, a personal story. Your son was attacked on a muni bus and there was no follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, luckily there has been, since a new change in police leadership, which I'm grateful for. And yeah, the case of the perpetrator on the Muni 29 that took out a stun gun and tried to, you know, stun gun a 16-year-old with a bunch of teens strapped on the bus. I mean, the same guy tried to, you know, crawl under the BART station, you know, what are those restrictive gates, and he had flashed a knife or something before in another incident not long before he attacked the kids on the Muni 29. So it's all linked in that sense, where it's definitely, you know, serial misdemeanors that lead up to felony situations on public transportation.
Yeah. So, and agreeing with all of this, I'm going to go back and be the contrarian here. We are as a class of people in part responsible for this.
Yeah.
Because we bought into stuff and we voted this way.
Yep.
And to think that someone like Donald Trump is going to offer us a deus ex machina to pull ourselves out of it, especially someone like Donald Trump, in my opinion, is just not going to do it for the right reasons. So the reality is that we really need to get the public to think more critically about these subjects so that we can elect the right people and enact the right policies at the local level. And the real struggle is how to do that.
I agree. And I kind of want to take that concept a little bit further. It's very difficult to be put in a position where you have to accept the assistance from someone you don't like, or worse, you actively hate. Everything about them makes you nauseous. You don't want to have anything to do with them. But ultimately, I think that you have to look at the whole picture, right? How are we doing? Are we getting what we need? Are we giving the public what they need? And obviously we're not. So I'll be a contrarian to you, and I will say, whatever help we can get that would actually have a positive impact, I'm going to have to say, I think that we should take it and then deal with what happens afterwards. You know, for example, somebody's pulling you out of an icy hole that you fell into, you know, broken ice kind of thing. You say, okay, here, I'll take that rope that you just threw me, and then when I get back up, then we can deal with our differences. But right now, people are drowning and dying, and we can't have that. So I mean, I know I err on the side of a lot of metaphors, but I mean, to me, that's like, it's so clear that we're failing and we're flailing, and I go ahead.
But to Mike's point, you know, there's also the issue of who we elect. I was frankly disappointed to see Brooke Jenkins I don't know who did that ex post, Lily or whoever did that ex post for her, whether it was her or not. But the whole, performative, read between the lines, I'm going to try to become attorney general at some point, just felt so forced and so not the Brooke who
Right.
ran for this job, who said she was 100% focused on taking down the fentanyl dealers. Yes, you can blame the judges to a certain extent. And the police are certainly low on people. Their retirement, people going out are going out at a much faster rate than people coming in. There are all kinds of tangibles that, things that are happening, but I just want to see people like Jackie Fielder. Who cares about Shimon Walton because he's termed out? But I want to see these people. Frankly, Connie Chan, who rumor is Nancy Pelosi may be courting to run for her seat. I wish they would just focus on the job they have right now. And that's just never been the way San Francisco has operated. As long as I've covered politics in San Francisco, it's always been about failing up, from Gavin Newsom early on, to Catherine Stephanie, Matt Haney. They've always got something they're trying to get to at a higher level. And that's a difference, I think, as well in what I see in other cities is people focus on the job at hand. A lot of people are saying Matt Mahan should run for governor. When I asked him about it, he just kind of shook his head very, calmly. He said, I've got a lot to do in San Jose. It wasn't coy. He just kind of brushed it off like, let's get back to talking about the problems that we still have with drugs. And I just wish that we'd see less performative national stage commentary and more, I want to hear Jackie Fielder say, but my constituents are suffering at the hands of fentanyl dealers. And if they're here illegally, they shouldn't be protected. But you'll never hear her say that.
Never, ever, ever.
As she struggles to read her Spanish cue cards that she couldn't even pronounce. It was so embarrassing. I speak better Spanish than she does.
You realize that I'm now going to have nightmares about waiting in the line at Cancun, and Jackie Fielder will be in front of me in line mispronouncing like at Saturday Night.
I would like a tripe taco.
Yeah, exactly. I have another zonker for you. If Connie Chan gets elected to the Congress, will she do less damage there than she has done at the Board of Supervisors?
I mean, look.
I tend to think that she will, simply because, not that I want to see her there, but, because, she's going to have to, follow a very, doctrinaire line from labor, from the national labor movement, and from other national issues, and hopefully she'll be able to leave a lot of the bugaboos that she and her mentor Aaron Peskin were more concerned about at home. But I don't know. We'll see.
So love her hate Nancy Pelosi, but the fact is that she's one of a kind. She's one strong woman. She entered this job, decades ago when the political landscape was different. The thought of Connie Chan being House Speaker is so disturbing to me.
Well, yeah,
but I can't. It could never happen.
Back to San Francisco.
It would never ever happen. I mean, if she does get in, I agree. She'll just fade into the woodwork.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that we actually did focus a little bit on Jackie Fielder right before this, because I want to announce to all of you, I want to dive into the whole issue of the public bank, in which she is a huge proponent. So I don't know if you all know, but actually banking is my main beat that I've been covering since the mid 90s, which is really crazy. Fascinating topic about what.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Will we be getting a story on it?
Yes, we are. So it's going to be a little bit long because it is rich, it is dense, it is a wild story, and there is a very strong reason as to why Jackie Fielder and her DSA friends are so behind it. So if
Yeah, I
anybody's
mean,
listening,
there's a whole mafia there at LAFCO, which is the agency that is behind trying to set up new. It's an agency that sets up new agencies within the city, and their main mission up in the past has been public power, and now they've gone into the other things, including the public bank. And it's like, you've got Jeremy and his lovely wife, and all their friends, the same people who have been responsible for the League of Pissed Off Voters voter guide, um, pretty much in control over there.
Wow. Well, and also, who's getting very active in it is Kristen Evans, who, speaking of, tomorrow at 9 a.m. and the Board of Supervisors chambers, yes, there will be a vote on whether she keeps her job for the massively shrunken homeless industrial complex commissions and committees, which is now down to the, the Homeless Oversight Commission, which she has been a member, but her term has expired and they have another applicant. The people making the decision, interestingly, tomorrow will be Raphael Mandelman, Stephen Sherrill, and Matt Dorsey sitting in for Supervisor Walton. And on a very interesting note about that, her goose is pretty much cooked unless something goes crazy wrong.
Her name isn't even on the agenda.
Yeah.
They've got the 3 people nominated to replace her on that seat. And then they've got nominations for 2 other seats. But, and assuming, seeing that, another member of the board could come in and say, well, we want to revisit the idea of putting her back on. I suppose that could happen, but at this point, yeah, sure.
It's very unlikely. The other interesting part of this is that Jennifer Friedenbach was on that same docket that, but Shaman Walton removed her because he wants to be there when they decide whether or not she should be taken from the now defunct Our City, Our Home, Proposition C, Let's Decide Where the Money Goes committee, where she made all these big decisions, as I've written about for years. She wants to now be on the Homeless Oversight Commission. And, of course, Walton, for some weird reason, doesn't feel the allegiance to Kristen that he does to Friedenbach. She may have photos of him, naked photos of him when he was at Hooters in Medellin or something. But basically,
people don't get naked at Medellin. People don't get naked at Hooters, even in Colombia.
So, yeah, I don't know what the deal is, but he wants to be there. But sources are telling me that it wouldn't make a difference because they still have the votes to not put her on that commission. And this is something I do very much like in Daniel Lurie's administration. They do not listen or care one iota what Kristen or Friedenbach have to say. They don't return their phone calls. They don't return their text. I know for a fact it's driving them absolutely insane. They want a seat at the table, and Daniel Lurie and his administration and the supervisors, majority of the supervisors that would be considered moderate supervisors, have absolutely no interest in meeting them or hearing what they have to say. So if there's one bright note that I see coming out of San Francisco, it is the end of the dynasty of the homeless industrial complex. Jennifer Friedenbach as the CEO, Kristen Evans as her vice president. I'm seeing, some of that coming crashing down. Funny or not funny, but on an interesting note is now she's fully throwing herself into anti-upzoning and the public bank, which is all very interesting because she sold her home in the Haight-Ashbury and bought a $2+ million condo in Half Moon Bay. So she's not even a full-time resident of San Francisco, which is required to be on a commission. And also, she's fighting things like for a public bank and against upzoning when she's living in a place like Half Moon Bay where I don't believe they'll have upzoning.
Exactly. All of these things, they just sort of come together.
Yep.
So it's coming on 12:30. And I hope this isn't just me. I'm not seeing anybody any of our listeners who volunteered to speak. Do we have some other topics that we can talk about or revisit some of our points.
Did you, Mike, want to tell us what's coming up at the Board of Supervisors as you do each week? What is coming up besides Kristen?
Well, let's see. That's the one thing I can go through now. So we've already gone through Rules Committee with the Land Use and Transportation Committee is mostly routine stuff because the family zoning plan has been put off until November the 2nd. So I'm not really seeing anything that's particularly news. I mean, they've got a full docket, but it's not really newsworthy. Board of Supervisors. Let me take a look at new business. Actually, well, that's a second reading on the Verizon settlement, which is like $2 million.
Isn't there a police commission, police chief thing happening in November?
Yeah, let's look at police commission real quick.
Yeah, are they really looking for a police chief? Because
well, yeah, they've got they've hired the consultants, and they don't have any November meetings set up yet. But actually, one of our intern writers wrote an article about what's been happening with the selection process and
yeah,
the consultant that they're dealing with, and the criteria that they've identified, and that was at the meeting that the Police Commission had earlier this month, right before the last two meetings, which has been basically exclusively public comment about what kind of attribute should be in the next police chief. So I suspect that once they do schedule something for November, it's going to have something meaty on it, but nothing has been announced as of yet.
No, and I sit on the board of the Chiefs Advisory Forum. That's on the 30th. That we'll be discussing this as well, about exactly what the next steps are, about what they're looking at.
Oh, so, good to know.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get some more information after the 30th.
Great.
Yeah. And then I can look at Budget and Finance Committee. I'm sure a member of the board will call me up and say, "What do you mean there's nothing meaningful happening this week?" But it looks like nothing meaningful is happening this week. Let's look at Planning Commission real quick. Be interesting to see what happens with the Gateway project, especially. This coming meeting has been canceled. One special for this they're always on a Thursday, and it's been canceled. So the next one is November 6th, and they don't have the agenda up for that yet. So there you go. I suspect this coming week is going to be a little bit sleepier, unless, of course, everyone changes their mind about federal assets coming into the city. Going back to that, Secretary Noem, our favorite puppy killing security, did warn San Francisco that if something like what happened in Alameda with someone ramming a truck, they could easily go back on their promise to suspend things. So who knows?
She and also the what's her name? The Barbie doll, the one that does the speaking.
Bondi?
Yeah, Barbie Bondi. She also called out specifically Nancy Pelosi and that DA in San Francisco. Again, when people say, "Oh, my gosh, all it took was a call from Lurie," yeah, I don't think that Donald Trump even knows who Lurie or Brooke Jenkins are. Pam Bondi certainly didn't. She's the Attorney General, and she had no clue. She said that DA. So I think they definitely are watching San Francisco. So I say all bets are off on whether anything happens. But I agree with Mike. It's not, certainly not with wanting to see San Francisco come back from the abyss. It's a political move. I think that, but on devil's advocate, San Francisco better get their act together, because now every time I see one of JJ's videos or Tenderloin activities or Frisco, or Erica reporting from the streets for The Voice, I simply say TikTok, Daniel Lurie, better get it together.
People
TikTok.
People posting their reports from their Citizen app onto social media, even. It's
yeah.
So TikTok until when? That's why I say the presser was very vague. We don't have a time frame. He didn't say, by the end of next month, by the end of November. We don't have. There is no clock ticking. We don't know what it is, because that has not been revealed. Quite frankly, I hope it's a short clock. I really do. I hope it's just a couple of weeks. But
it's going to take longer than that.
Yeah.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying Donald Trump, I don't know what his clock is. If he gave Lurie a ticker here, and he's staring at his watch, going, "You have until X amount." I think that is the great unknown. I hope it's a short time frame. I really do. I don't want 6 months, because people are dying.
Right.
Businesses are fleeing. Right. Crime is escalating. So don't give me this. We need a short.
Well, the whole issue of having this thing suspended over our heads is that presumably, I would assume that there's a presumption that additional federal asset assistance will be accepted in the meantime. And that's probably what we should be really looking for.
I think that is happening. I believe that is happening. Yeah. I think that Daniel Lurie didn't say that it wasn't. I think he kind of, as Erica said, indicated that it is. On the other hand, the videos just keep, defying reality of how coddled these drug users are, sprawled out on the sidewalks and cursing and yelling at people that ask them to move along, because they just look at them and say, nothing's going to happen to me. And they're right. And until something does, it's just, nothing's going to change. And just as a stark reminder, we're still working on the series. It's a intense and it's an intensive series that with Gina from co-founder of Mothers Against Drug Addiction and Death, who's here listening today. But we're working with our data guy on numbers, hardcore statistics, and it takes time, so be patient with us. But the series will and is exposing how many deaths, like we did expose in the first, the outline series, that and now it's over 4,000 people that have died since 2020, and just this year, since Daniel Lurie took office, over 500 people have died of overdoses. So that is something that I think he should be a lot more concerned with than saying, hey, we have, Shabuzi coming. I mean, it really needs to be something he focuses on.
I could not agree more. And I have to say, when I see tour buses, the double-decker tour buses going through the Tenderloin and the Civic Center.
Oh, God.
Every time I'm down there, I see this, and I'm thinking, is this some sort of like, is somebody somewhere going, okay, that's it. We want tourists to see this. We want them to see the real San Francisco, and not the prettified PR version of it, because I'm like, there's no reason that they're heading down Larkin and Eddie.
Wow.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. So they see the truth, and I'm really glad for it, because everybody should.
It's everybody too, again, just having come back from a week in Mendocino, everywhere that we went, every person we talked to, from small cafes to the people running the inns, everybody that, when you say from San Francisco, it just, the face they make is so different than I remember getting when I was in New York 10 years ago, even. People go, ooh, I love San Francisco. Now it's this, oh gosh, ooh. or you hear the old, oh, I won't go there, or last time I was there, my car got broken into, or oh my God, I saw a person overdose. I mean, it's just it just, you don't get the same level anymore of you get almost a sad face, like, oh God. So that's, I mean,
the other issue is that there are still parts of the city that are insulated from it.
Well, I'm going to back away from that a little bit.
I mean, if you stay in the sunset and
not true. Not true. I'm in the sunset. No, that's not true.
No, you honestly, you are seeing people who are coming from out of town who say the city looks better. I was literally just out at Yerba Buena yesterday. Talked to a family who hadn't been here in a year. She goes, "Oh, it's much better than it was." So you do see. I'm not going to paint this black and white. You are, and my family came in from out of town. My daughter and my mom, they came in, and they both said, "Yeah, the Uber driver was saying, yeah, it's a lot easier for him. It's a lot better for him. He's seeing some changes." So everyone's experience is different, and you do feel that there is. I know, Susan, you love to mock Daniel Lurie about San Francisco's rising.
Go San Francisco!
Go San Francisco! But I think some of it is real. Some of it people are feeling.
Were your relatives here right after Dreamforce by any chance?
Oh, they were just here last week.
Well, there you go. Ba-dum-bum.
Well, I mean, no, this came from the Uber driver who was talking to them.
Yeah, who's driving during Dreamforce.
You see similar reports on Reddit as well. People come and they're surprised, and that's often because they aren't going through the Tenderloin or Civic Center.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I see it, in the sense that I definitely see it in the marina. The marina is just unbelievable. It's out of control how bad it's gotten. We've seen it in North Beach, the three of us. But, it's certainly not as bad. You're not going to see the,
Is it on Chestnut Street, or is it still relegated to like Lombard?
No, Chestnut Street. It has come off of, it's come off of Lombard, and it's Chestnut Street is absolutely horrific. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Supervisor Sherrill is doing the legislation to try to enforce keeping them away from, because there's schools in the marina, so many that's where they're doing drugs right there in the open in front of the schools. We've got the masturbating guy 3 times, he keeps getting released. They've got the guys in the bus sitting there just getting high in front of the coffee roastery. There's a woman that wanders around threatening people, muttering. I mean, there's a high level. There's our editor's husband who was bashed over the head by Xavier Blue Wright, who was put in diversion, speaking of, instead of, again, crime is down. Well, he should have been charged with assault and attempted murder, but instead he got sent to Baker Places. So, there's a whole, we could go on.
Back for a while for return engagement.
Yep. Yeah. He's back in jail.
He's back in jail, fortunately. So.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's multiple layers of the system that just.
Yeah, there's parts of the city that I think look a lot better. I feel. I've always, maybe I'm just a city girl at heart, but I've always felt safe, but I've always been careful. I don't go on my phone when I'm walking around, there's just things you just don't do. But, when I can't help it. John laughs at me when we're not in the city, but I get into if I go to Costco or grocery store, I take my purse and the little seat belt for the kids. I buckle that around the strap of my purse. And it worked, because one time at the Safeway on Market Street, a guy grabbed my purse and started running, and I had a cart full of stuff for Thanksgiving, and, he didn't get very far. So it works, ladies. But bottom line is, there's still then I went, for that, walk at night at the Tenderloin, and everything was looking pretty good by City Hall. I have to say there's a lot of law enforcement presence. It was, turning to dusk, and that's when the craziness comes out more. And I have to say that it looked really pretty good until we got to Willow. And of course, that's always been a horrible, and then something, not just a week after, something happened there, a shooting, I believe. So it's a very, there's a big stark change. And by the way, the Civic Center Inn, where We got that great story from Erica, where she and JJ went and saved a dog's life, who, by the way, is in a foster home. They had to amputate the leg, but her name is Holiday. She's absolutely the happiest puppy. She's out of the area, but in a great foster home with kids. But so yeah, I mean that place still, I know it's being redone, but when we were there, it was still just people lying all over the sidewalks in front of it, boarded up. Dogs, and on couches, pit bulls, of course, my dog of love that I love, just, everywhere. It's still sad.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And on that cheery note.
On that cheery note. Okay, here's another cheery note then.
Okay, there we go.
All right. Crime, sadly, here's like a sad, happy note. It's typically between other criminals. It's between drug dealers dealing with drug dealers right. Dealing with people who haven't paid up, who are users. I never feel, almost never, and I mean rarely, almost never feel in danger when I'm out and about, and that's good. That's good, because I've been in places where I absolutely have felt in danger. South side of Chicago, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it's a no-go zone. But nowhere in San Francisco have I ever truly felt really in danger. And I am a woman.
Yeah.
Last I checked.
I would not walk through the Tenderloin at night by myself. I have to late at night. I'd what JJ does. I mean, he's, I would never. I mean, by myself. No, I've done it with you and JJ, but I wouldn't do it by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are. I have to tell you that there have been times when I have felt like I've been in danger. In fact, it happened to me right in front of my home. I was waiting for an Uber, and this person who clearly had some type of mental illness issue started tossing stones at me.
No.
And trying to essentially, they're about the size of like walnuts or something. And I start hearing, it feels like somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, and then I turn around, and it's this guy who's like raving to himself and throwing stones at me. Which tells me, okay, I see my own. I have self-awareness problems. Obviously, if I didn't know this threat was right behind me.
Well, and that's a good point, Mike. That to say that I think that the biggest risk to the average citizen is not from drug dealers and shooting amongst themselves or actual criminals, but from the mentally ill, the violent mentally ill who are being put in diversion rather than sent to jail for actual crimes. And if you can bash a 70-something-year-old man that you don't even know over the head at 11 o'clock at the Palace of Fine Arts, you'll do it to anyone. And that guy also had arrests for kidnapping, for holding young schoolgirls against their will in the marina. Those are the guys, and we know this from what happened to Colton. Liz refers to him often, Liz Lee, as being, a 6'4" athletic young man who tried to defend a woman and children and ended up with, being stabbed in the neck and dying at a bus stop. So don't ever let down your guard and think that person raving behind you can also then pull out a knife, because it happens, and they also will whack you over the head just on, that's just don't engage and try to get away. But in Ken's case, I mean, he was walking the dog, and he's lived in the city his whole life, but he just looked up, and there the guy was. So you do have to be aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're in the Tenderloin, South of Market, etc., you're typically collateral damage versus the target. But when you're elsewhere and you are confronting the mentally ill, drug addicted people, you could be a target. Thank God, I've had a couple bad experiences, but very, 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 very few. But yeah, Head on a swivel. Always a good.
Yeah, and I got chased down the street with a stick in the marina, remember, by one of the guys,
Yes.
Garrett Doty's friend, a year before the whole Carmignani thing, for zero reason other than the fact that he patrolled that alley regularly. And I was staying with I was house sitting for a friend and was putting my car in the garage. And you know, it's pretty scary when you look up and some huge dude is coming at you with a stick, smacking it and yelling, calling you names, and you don't even know him, you know. So, you know, just, I'm going to kill you, bitch. I'm going to kill you, bitch. Like, and you don't know if he's looking at you or someone else, but whatever. I got in the garage, slammed the door, and, you know, and I watched him pace by the door for a bit. But again, there's a case of someone where I didn't bother to call the police because why? I mean, he's by the time I did, he's gone. They knew who he was. He had committed he'd thrown, talk about throwing rocks. His thing was throwing rocks at mothers with baby carriages.
Right.
So these are the guys that are, you know, again, crime is down because you don't arrest guys like that.
Right.
No,
well, I want to say thank you for everybody, Liz. It was great to hear your voice today.
Yes,
thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
And very much looking forward to, you know, all the upcoming articles that are going to be on The Voice. And, you know, if you haven't seen what's up there now, take a look. Yeah, we have some great ones. We have the 4-part series on diversion that I did that has all the statistics on why diversion doesn't work. We have, you know, coverage of City Hall and what's going on down there from Mike. I still say need to go back and read anything that Liz and Erica have written because they're all still very current. And we have a lot of great stuff coming up. So, and some great interns. We have some journalism student interns from Berkeley who have been doing great work. And I'm so encouraged to see this new generation of journalists who are making pitches. They're excellent writers. I mean, it's just so refreshing. So refreshing to see a new generation caring about journalism.
That is I just got a chill. Positive thing to leave.
Yes. Excellent.
And on a positive note.
Yes.
It's 12:50 right now. Let's wish all of our listeners a happy Sunday and finish the rest of our weekends and get back to the grindstone Monday morning.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening, everyone.